and just to welcome you. And also, I'd love to know if you actually do watch this entire section or how much of it you do. If you could leave me a comment, especially either if you watch this on YouTube or Facebook, let me know. Also, if you enjoy it or if you have suggestions, but specifically, I'd love to have some reaction if you do have one and to get some idea of how much of this you're watching, etc., etc. So please let me know if you would take a moment to either like it or, just react in some way. Thank you. We'll start with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And so, I was just thinking how this all started. You know how this all starts, this series of misadventures, you might say, or tragedies, actually starts with the death of Miriam. That is, and the fact that she's associated with a well, a water, which, of course, how do you survive without water? And water is such a precious commodity. For sure, here in California, where we're experiencing a drought, but certainly in the Middle East, where there's so much desert and so little arable land, and just the idea of possibly that Miriam being associated with that well and that water, just to show how important she was and how when she passes on, this is when this whole incident occurs, and Moses and Aaron are not capable of sustaining the place without any personal sacrifice. They actually wind up, of course, not being able to enter the land of Israel either, just as Miriam was unable to. And I think there's some sort of interesting associations that one might make based on the fact that this all starts with Miriam's passing. So we're on to a little bit of a different topic now, and that is we're going to see exactly what happens here. Vayishlach. Sorry, I don't know what happened. I don't know if you saw what happened. So you can see. All right, so I'm going to stop the share and see if I can get this to work properly. I have no idea. Electronics are complicated. Oh dear. Okay, I may have to quit this. Let me do something here and see. Okay, let me try again without having to totally restart nope, looks like I'm going to have to restart the entire application. So please forgive me. I'm going to have to quit preview and get back in. Life is interesting. So forget, anybody want to comment while I'm having to do what I'm doing?
Sure, I think there's a really great thing going on in Golda's screen with her cat.
Oh, I see it. Yeah, no, of course I had to. Yeah, that is true.
It's just lovely being with everyone and getting to know everyone and seeing. Yeah, Golda.
Yeah. Pie's just kind of exploring the top of the chair.
They are wonderful for sure. All right, I think I'm back in business. I'm going to try this once again. I have no idea what happened there. Right, the famous started all over again, and maybe it'll work this time. So, verse 14. Vayishlach Moshe malachim mikadesh el melech Edom. Moses sent messengers. So notice the word malach. It's also the word we use for angels. So that essentially our understanding of the function of an angel is as a messenger from the divine. So in this case, they can simply be regular messengers. So Moses sent angels from Kadesh. That was, remember, where they were. And this again, could be, it sounded from previous comments, if I understood them correctly, that this, Kadesh Barnea, but then we heard Kadesh also refers to Mount Sinai in a way. So maybe I misunderstood it, but anyway. El Melech Edom. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Seen I thought it said Sin refers to Sinai, and I wasn't sure if Sin and Kadesh were the same.
Right. It seemed to me I would have to go back and look. And the point is, this is 40 years later, right? This is the 40 years have passed by. So, and I also thought that, in fact, the trying to think of where the messengers were sent from, I'd have to go back and check. So, at any rate, just leaving it out there, he sent them from Kadesh, which was the last place we read that they were, El Melech Edom, to the king of Edom. And of course, Edom is that's the tribe that descended from Esau, right? It's another name for Esau. He's also called Edom because when he was born, he had this red hairy mantle on him. He was hairy and had this red hair on him as an infant. Ko amar achicha Yisrael. Thus says your brother, right? Your brother Israel. So that's a little remarkable. Ata yadata, you know, et kol hatla'a asher matza'atnu. You are aware of all the troubles that have befallen us. And if you read this, if you don't sort of think about this carefully, who's the us here? Is it just the Israelites, or is it the Israelites and Edom? So we're going to look, this is all going to give Rashi grist for his mill. First comment, Achicha Yisrael, your brother Israel. Ma ra'a lahiskir kan achava. What on earth did Moses see here to bring up this issue of fraternity, that they're brothers? Why? Ela amar lo achim anachnu. But what he was trying to say to him is, we are brothers, Edom and Yisrael. Bnei Avraham were both descendants or children, right, of Abraham. Shene'emar, to whom was said in Genesis 15, Ki ger yiheh zaracha, that your offspring will be strangers. Al shnenu haya oto hachov lifroa. So since it was given to Abraham, and we are descendants of Abraham, and he was told this, that we are his banim, we both had this particular fate to have to endure. And the way it's expressed in Hebrew here is to pay off that debt. The debt being that your children are going to be strangers, and that whole prophecy that Abraham received. Both of us, that's the point about us being brothers. Not finished with this thought. We're going to go. Ata yadata et kol hatla'a. You are aware of all the troubles. That would include, of course, being the gerim, the strangers in a land not theirs. The fichach, piresh avichem, and you know that that's the reason that your ancestor, your father, right, separated, left, me'al avinu. That's why he separated off from our ancestor, from our father. And here's the quote. This is from Genesis 36. Vayelech el eretz mipnei Yaakov achiv. Interesting way of interpreting the Hebrew there. So it says, he went, that's Esau. That would be clear from the context of this verse. El eretz, to a land, mipnei Yaakov achiv, on account of Jacob, his brother. Now, if you just look at that superficially, you'd say, oh, okay, the two just didn't get along, and he decided he'd move off and go somewhere else. But the mipnei is an interesting because of here. And Rashi interprets it this way, and this, of course, based on tradition. Mipnei hashtar chov. It was on account of this note of indebtedness. That's what a shtar is a word that means a contract, right? A document, chov, of indebtedness. Hamutal aleihem, that had been placed upon them, both of them. Vehetilo al Yaakov, and Esau placed the debt on Jacob. Esau didn't want to deal with it, And so he made Jacob pay for the whole debt. This debt that we're referring to, of course, is this prophecy that God gives to Abraham, that his children are going to be strangers in a strange land and that they're going to be oppressed, etc., etc. That was a prophecy. It was going to happen to some descendants, to the descendants, in the way it's stated there, it would be all the descendants of Abraham. Well, apparently not. So, just some interesting, insightful things. Let's keep going. So you understand this. Vayerdu avotenu Mitzrayim. Look at how this commentary, which is, it's not obvious, but the very fact that it's followed, right? Understanding it the way we just did, as Vayerdu avotenu Mitzrayim. So as an explanation of what Rashi has just said, this previous verse means, right? Our ancestors went down to Egypt, Vaneshev b'Mitzrayim yamim rabim, and we dwelt in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, for many, literally it says days, but it really means for a long time. That's how we could translate it. And yom doesn't always mean 24 hours. Sometimes it means 12 hours. It means daytime. Sometimes it can actually refer to a year. Vayereu lanu Mitzrayim. And Egypt dealt harshly with us. They did evilly with us. V'la avotenu, and to our ancestors, to our fathers, literally. Vayareu lanu, right? They did evil to us. Savalnu tsarot rabot. We had to endure many troubles. Much, you've heard the Yiddish expression, possibly, tsoris. Tsoris means troubles, and it's from this Hebrew of tsarot. By the way, tsar itself, Mitzrayim, right? Tsar means narrow. So it's like when you're pressed in by troubles and you feel hemmed in and you don't feel you're free to operate because you're having to deal with these troubles. V'la avotenu, and to our fathers. So of course we know that the avot often refers to the patriarchs. Well, the patriarchs certainly weren't in Egypt at the time of the enslavement. So how do we understand this? Mikan. So from this, we infer Sheha'avot, that our patriarchs, mitzta'arim bekever, that they are saddened, right? They're troubled, they're saddened in the grave, bekever. Keshepur anut ba'a al Yisrael, when tribulation comes to Israel. And there's something very beautiful about that connectivity, that there's that life doesn't end with the grave, that there's a level of awareness. By the way, there's a discussion about this in Tractate Brachot as to whether the people who have deceased are aware of what's going on in this world. Well, certainly the patriarchs would be an example here. And the question, of course, is they are sui generis, so maybe it would just be them. But anyway, there is that discussion in the Talmud. So, Vanitzak el Hashem, we cried out to God, Vayishma kolenu, and he heard our voice. Vayishlach malach, and he sent an angel. Vayotzienu, there's that word malach again, right? Vayotzienu, and he took us out, Mitzrayim, from Egypt. Vehine, and see, behold, anachnu b'Kadesh, we are here in Kadesh, Ir Ketsei Gedul Gulecha, a city, literally, that is at the edge of your border. So again, I must have misunderstood what Rashi was saying in those commentaries about Kadesh, because it certainly sounds like we're not talking about Sinai or the wilderness of Sinai here at all. So at any rate, let's take a look at Rashi. Vayishma kolenu. God heard our voice. Remember, we cried out to God. Bivracha shebeirachnu avinu. This was by means of the blessing with which our father blessed us. And the father we're talking about here is Isaac. When Jacob came to Isaac to take Esau's blessing, Isaac couldn't see very well, and Rebecca put these skins of the goat, I believe, on Jacob's arms and around his neck. And so Isaac felt him, and he said the famous words, Hakol kol Yaakov v'yadayim yedei Esav, that the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And that's understood as a powerful metaphor to mean that when he says the voice is the voice of Jacob, that the strength of the descendants of Jacob come through their voice of prayer, right? That the way in which we defend ourselves and the way we are protected is through prayer, through our voice. And the arms are the arms of Esau, is that Esau uses arms to defend himself and to attack and to protect. That Esau depends on arms and Jacob depends on prayer. Here it is. Genesis 27, Hakol kol Yaakov, that the voice is the voice of Jacob. She'anu tzu'okim u'na'anim. That is, that we cry out and we are answered. So it says, remember, it's talking about the experience in Egypt, and said that God sent a malach, an angel. Ze Moshe. We should understand that this malach, right, this messenger is talking about Moses. It's not talking about a divine messenger in an angelic kind of sense. It is Moses. And Mikan, and from this we can derive, Shahan Nevi'im, that the prophets, Kru'im Malachim, they're also referred to as Malachim, as angels. V'omer, and it says, and this is Chronicles, the second book, chapter 36, Vayhi mal'ivim b'malachei ha'elohim. It says, and there they would insult the malachei, there's the word, right? The angels of God, referring to the prophets, that they were insulting God's prophets. They weren't paying attention to them, they were mocking them, etc., etc. Na'abrana ba'artzecha. Please let us pass ba'artzecha, through your land. Lo na'avor bistei uvecherem. We will not traverse a field or a vineyard. Velo nishte mei ve'er. We will not drink the waters of a be'er, a cistern. Derech hamelech nelech. We will only go by the king's way, by the king's highway. Lo nite yamin usmol. We will not turn right or left, ad asher navor bigvulecha, until we have traversed through your border. Rashi. Na'abrana ba'artzecha. Please let us traverse through your land. Ein lecha le'orer. So Rashi is paraphrasing what Moses is saying. He says, you don't have to contest al hayerusha shel Eretz Yisrael. You shouldn't contest our entitlement to the land of Israel, that it's our inheritance. Why? Keshem shelo parata hachov, because you didn't pay out the debt, that debt that we had mentioned before. Interesting, these dynamics that are going on, right? You didn't take care of the original setup. Part of that setup is that the whole thing, of course, was that there were going to be strangers in a strange land, that they would be oppressed for I think 400 years, if I'm not mistaken, and then they would be given the land of Israel. And since Esau had nothing to do with that, they shouldn't be questioning the right of the Israelites to enter the land of Canaan. Let's see. Aseh lanu ezer ma'at. Please give us a little bit of a help. La'avor derech artzecha, so that we can pass by way of your land. V'lo nishte me be'er. We will not drink from the waters of your be'er, of your well. But this is the Midrash Rabbah, Bamidbar Rabbah, Numbers Rabbah. Me beirot hayat tzarich lomar. So it's picking up a little bit of an unusual expression. It says the waters of a fountain. And the Midrash Rabbah is saying that doesn't make complete sense, because it should have said the waters of wells. It wasn't just one well that they weren't going to drink from. They weren't going to drink from any of the wells that they would, of course, encounter as they went through the land. Ela kach amar Moshe. So what's going on here? This is what Moses was actually trying to say. Afal pi sheyesh b'yadenu, even though we have in our possession man le'echol, we've got manna to eat. Remember, God is still providing them the manna every day except Shabbos. Uve'er lishtot, and a well to drink. This is interesting, because if in fact this is happening after Miriam's death, we said that the be'er of Miriam no longer existed. So the question is, what is he talking about when he says we have a well to drink from? Is it that in fact, when God told him to speak to the rock and that it would give forth water, and then we read the whole story about Moses striking a rock, which wasn't the rock God was referring to, again, trying to understand where Rashi's coming from, and that possibly now, even though the Torah doesn't state it explicitly, assumedly that rock which Moses hopefully eventually spoke to, is that what we're to infer? And that it could now provide them with water. At any rate, this is a little puzzle right here. Lo nishte mimenu, we won't drink from that well. Ela nikne mikem, but what we will do is we will purchase from you food, ochel umayim, and water. So even though we have enough to keep us going, and we don't need to take any of your food or any of your water, we will buy it. We will purchase it. Lahana atchem, for your benefit. Mikan, and from this we can infer a general good. This isn't a mitzvah, it's more and this is, and on the other hand, a good practice is what they're saying. La'achsanai, we're saying that a lodger or a guest at a hotel or an inn, she'af al pi sheyesh biyado le'echol, that even though he might have food in his possession, yikne min hachenvani, he should purchase food from the tavern keeper, kedei lehenot et ushpizo, so as to benefit the one who's offering him hospitality. Last little Rashi here. Derech hamelech nelech, we will go by the king's highway. Anu, and this is lovely here. So what does he mean? Remember, he says we won't turn left or right, just follow the king's highway. Anu, yes. Anu chosmim et behemtenu, we will muzzle our cattle. V'lo yatu lakan ulachan, so that they won't be able to turn to this way and that, le'echol, to eat. So we're going to make sure we don't do any damage. We're going to benefit you, etc., etc. We'll give as little trouble as we can. And I'm going to mark this now. Okay, let's see if this will show me. I'll need to do this later. Okay, never mind. Let's just do this. And I'm going to stop the share and pause a moment. If anyone has any reactions to what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
I guess you didn't see my hand was
Oh, I'm
up.
sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't.
So it was about the comment about Esau.
Yes.
So I know that tradition likes to see Esau as our enemies, be they Christian or Arab or otherwise. But I'm wondering, in light of the fact that the distinguishing factor here was praying versus using military force, whether now we can integrate the two as one person, because we certainly do pray and certainly do use military force, sometimes even perhaps aggressively more than just defensively.
Right. I know. It raises such interesting issues with regards to that. And I think that's actually, they're two very important and major questions that you're raising here. One is how we depict Esau. By the way, we do not consider, you're right, there is a connection made with Christianity. There is not a connection made with Islam. Islam, the connection is through Ishmael, interestingly enough. For me, the major factor involved, and I appreciate the inference that you're making, is the fact that nevertheless, Esau's our twin brother. And whether in that narrative, the Torah is giving us a mandate of where we should be heading. I mean, and we even have an example here of Moses trying to reach out to them. It's tough. The problem is, of course, anti-Semitism. People say, it's on the rise. The thing about that I feel isn't the whole truth is hatred in general is on the rise. And I wonder if Muslims could say Islamophobia is on the rise, whether the African American community could say quite legitimately, they're examples of hatred against African Americans, and it's on the rise. Latinos, there's not a lot of love, depending on where you are in the States, for Latinos, and it's pretty awful. So I don't want to say we've got a corner on this market.
I mean, if you even take violence and ethnicity out of the picture,
yes.
Going into niches and having, political or social or whatever enemies and just sticking in your corner and looking at your sources and disregarding the other sources, all of that kind of stuff, this divisiveness of society in general is on the rise, even taking violence and ethnicity out of the picture.
Precisely. This is the point I was trying to make. Thank you. So just generally, I mean, I think the one thing that we could think about is kindness. And kindness means kindness to Esau, and it means kindness to Ishmael, and it means kindness all the way around. And I think, to go into these old tropes again isn't really helpful. And I would hope that we've learned the lesson from that. But of course, that remains to be seen. So I think that regardless of how the tradition depicts a relationship with Esau, and of course, this little episode isn't going to end the way Moses had hoped. Regardless, there's that overarching fact that Esau is our twin. And what does that suggest? Because I think it suggests a lot.
It's an opportunity.
Yes.
It's an opportunity to make amends, and given him an opportunity, and they chose not to use it.
In that particular case, but it doesn't. But I think the real lesson is that Moses is reaching out.
Mm-hmm.
That's you can emphasize. That's the whole point about interpretations, is you can choose to emphasize whatever you want. you know.
And this is why I'm saying that they can be integrated as one person,
Mhm.
because it's all metaphoric.
Yes.
And they have the same DNA, and they are from the same egg and the same womb. And I
Yes.
know twins are twins and not the same, but metaphorically, you know, you can look at them as two sides of one person, especially in this case when there is that kind of obvious split, and people in general really don't have that obvious split. So integrating, you
Mhm.
know, into one personality, to
Correct.
me, makes sense.
Okay. Okay. And I'm going to let you have the last word on that. So thank you, everyone. If you have a chance, if you have been watching this all the way through, for those who are watching the recording, please let me know. I'd love to know. Take care, and until Sunday, have a Shabbat Shalom and all the best.
Shabbat shalom, y'all.